Okay, so we've gotten our glucose catabolized into pyruvic acid, and then it got converted to acetyl-CoA. It went through the Krebs cycle. Our glucose, our C6H12O6, is now just 6 molecules of carbon dioxide. But we took this large molecule, we broke it into small molecules, and we released energy in the form of ATP. That's the energy we want. But we also have another form of energy, high energy molecules, NADHs and FADHs. So because these molecules exist, these NADHs and FADHs, there's still some energy in there. And so the electron transport chain, another metabolic pathway, takes these molecules and uses the energy in these molecules to make ATP. So it turns out when you have anabolism, when cells are going to grow and cells are going to do their daily functions, they can't use NADH for energy. They can only use ATP. So the role of the electron transport chain, the third part of aerobic cellular respiration, is to take these high energy molecules, this NADH, FADH, and the NADH and FADH, and use that energy to make more ATP. So I have electron transport chain. So the way that the electron transport chain is a very well studied process. There's a lot more details than what I'm going to tell you, but I'm going to give you the bare minimum here. What happens in the electron transport chain, in fact, I'm going to, let me see. Each one of these NADHs or FADHs, they've got these electrons that they have to pass on to the electron transport chain. And this picture is kind of showing you that. Like these, see these steps in the electron transport chain? Well, those are the same thing as each one of these steps right here. And so here I've got some NADH, and it gives its electrons to this first molecule in the electron transport chain. And this molecule has to pass the electrons to the next guy. And this guy is going to pass its electrons to the next guy, and to the next guy, and the next guy. So if I look at this picture, I'm saying I have NADH. NADH is going to pass its electrons to this first electron carrying molecule in the electron transport chain. This is going to pass electrons to the next one, to the next one, to the next one, to the next one, and down this electron transport chain. Think of this as I'm NADH, and I'm carrying a beach ball. That's my electrons. I'm going to hand my beach ball to the first person in line. So here's a line of people. I'm going to hand my beach ball, my electrons, to person number 1. And that person's going to hand the beach ball to the next one. And this person's going to hand the beach ball to that one. And this person's going to hand the beach ball to this person. And they're going to hand the beach ball to that person and to that person. And that has to happen for ATP to be synthesized. That is a really general statement where I'm skipping a lot of details. But if you just take my word for it, that you need to, I use an NADH molecule or an FADH. I pass the electrons down the electron transport chain. Now, what happens if we're looking at the beach ball model, we get to the end here, and this guy's standing there holding a beach ball. So what happens is, remember you labeled this as oxygen? Oxygen can come up and take the electrons from this last person, from this last electron carrier. And when oxygen gains electrons, it turns into water. And there's a perfectly logical chemical reason in chemistry why that happens, but you don't have to remember. So what you want to know is oxygen is what we call the final electron acceptor in the electron transport chain. oxygen comes along, picks up the electrons, or in our model, the beach ball, from this last person, and oxygen turns into water and goes away. And then a new molecule of oxygen comes along. Oh, well, a new molecule of NADH or FADH is going to send its electrons down the electron transport chain. And this guy's going to end up holding some electrons. Oxygen comes along, picks up the electrons, and leaves as water. Okay? Now go back to our beach ball analogy. If I walked up with my beach ball, gave this person the beach ball, they passed it down, the last person in the row has the beach ball. Let's say there was no oxygen. This person has a beach ball in their hands. Oh, okay. Well, NADH, a new NADH comes along and sends the beach ball down. Well, this last guy's already got a beach ball. So I'm going to leave my beach ball with this guy. And you can imagine how if we don't have oxygen, eventually the electron transport chain is going to get all filled up with electrons, and nobody else, and you can't process any more NADH. Okay? We need oxygen to be what we call the final electron acceptor, to take the electrons from this last electron carrier, leave as water, and now I can send more electrons down there. So I can keep processing glucose, and I can keep this process going. As long as the electron transport chain keeps going, it powers an enzyme called ATP synthase. Now, when you look at that, you go, ATP synthase, what the heck does that do? Oh, it makes ATP. So the electron transport chain turns out that it makes the most ATP. It makes more ATP than glycolysis. It makes more ATP than the Krebs cycle. Most of the ATP in the aerobic cellular respiration is made in the electron transport chain. And as long as you can keep sending electrons down here, and you have a steady supply of oxygen, and the oxygen turns into water, you can keep this going, and you can keep powering this enzyme. So if we look at this picture again, here's those electron carriers, and they're all balanced chemically here, but it's showing you NADH drops off its electrons, it transfers them to here, to here, to here, to here. Oxygen comes along, picks up those electrons, turns into water, and you can keep moving these electrons, and as long as you do that, you can power this enzyme, ATP synthase, to make ATP. So I have the question here, what happens if there's no available oxygen? If you're a human and all of a sudden you're choking and you don't have any oxygen, what's going to happen? Oxygen's gone. You're going to feed some electrons down your electron transport chain, but your electron's going to get stuck here. It can't leave because there's no oxygen. More electrons are going to get pushed down. Oh, they get stuck there. More electrons. Now they get stuck here, 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 here. All these electron carriers already have electrons. They can't take any more. What's going to happen? We're going to stop making ATP synthase. We can't make, that won't work anymore. We're actually going to stop glycolysis in the Krebs cycle because we get this backup of this NADH and FADH. It's not being processed. So what's going to happen? Think about what happens to a human when we don't have oxygen. It takes minutes that we no longer have enough energy to remain conscious. Aerobic cellular respiration is absolutely essential to extract energy from our food and make ATP every second of our life. If we stop breathing in oxygen, we stop the electron transport chain, and we are no longer able to get energy from our glucose, from our blood glucose, and we will die very fast. That's how important this is. You will pass out and die if you do not breathe in a relatively short period of time. And it's all because of this. This big, long chemical metabolic pathway is going on in our cells all the time. And it's the same thing that's going on in most bacterial cells or in the aerobic bacterial cells. So it's pretty important. I want to give you one little variation there. It says, explain how carbon monoxide affects aerobic cellular respiration and its consequences. So carbon monoxide, you might have heard of people getting carbon monoxide poisoning. Carbon monoxide is a waste product of combustion. So I hate to even say this, but people commit suicide. They vent their car exhaust into their car and they breathe that because there's some in waste in exhaust from any kind of combustion, like cars or anything like that. So carbon monoxide, or people might get their heater's not working right, and it's dumping waste into their house, so they get carbon monoxide poisoning in their house. They get high carbon monoxide levels. What happens when somebody gets high carbon monoxide? Well, they start getting dizzy, they can't stand up, they can't think right, because they're not making enough ATP. They're getting incredibly fatigued, and they will die. So what does carbon monoxide do? See, it actually sticks to this electron carrier. And because it sticks right here, oxygen can't come and grab those electrons. Carbon monoxide, when somebody's getting carbon monoxide poisoning, carbon monoxide sticks right here in this electron transport chain. So oxygen can't come and get the electrons and leave as water. It backs up the electron transport chain. So the person can't make ATP. So they die. Okay? And that's really dangerous. So if anybody's getting carbon monoxide poisoning, you're suspecting it, you want them to get them out. Usually it's indoors, so you want to get them outdoors and start breathing some oxygen to start trying to knock that carbon monoxide off the electron transport chain. It's a really serious situation.